a lot of people that knew New York for the longest time in the club scene are saying the New York nightlife scene is dead at this point. And I would say it's not dead. It's it's going through an incubation period. That's what I feel, is that, you know, it's kind of like the moth in the cocoon that's getting ready to become a butterfly again, once it finds its wings.
Today is January 26, 2021. Who are we speaking with?
Lee Hairston in New York City.
Describe the moment you fell in love with house music.
House music. Okay. All right. So we're coming up to house music, because I go all the way back to the beginning.
So actually, okay, let's go back to the beginning. Describe the moment when you fell in love with club music and nightlife, disco, all that.
Well, I have the good fortune of having come of age at the time when the music scene was booming. It was on the tail end of Motown, and the sound and dance music was evolving and developing and turning into something else than it was in terms of R&B and the Black community, or the community at large, really, because, you know, Motown touched the Black community, but then it reached out beyond the Black community and became kind of universal, even though a lot of people at that time, because of the times, weren't really able to acknowledge where they were getting a lot of their music from. They was buying it nonetheless, because it was just such a great sound and such a great spirit that people wanted to have it, period. So I came of age at that point. So around 13, 14, we're talking 1971, 1972. And that was when I first started my club experiences, through friends, really, who were going to clubs and who talked me into following them. And I was like, yeah, all right, let's see what we can do. Now, mind you, I'm 13 and 14 years old at that point, and I'm like, okay, I'm not sure how we're supposed to be getting up in these clubs, but hey, you know somebody, you know something, we'll go and check it out and see what happens. And because I was tall and because I looked older than I was, after some resistance initially, and you know, looks never hurt anybody. And it was a gay club, and the owner was gay, and I guess he liked the way I looked and said, you know, all right. He said, well, you're not going to be drinking. And I was like, no, I don't drink. I don't drink. So that's not a problem. So he was like, all right, you know, and he let us in. And I had always feared going to a gay club originally, because I just, I pictured a gay bar as literally like gay men just sitting around waiting at a bar, lusting for boys. That's kind of what I pictured. And it's like, you know, the wolf pack, and, you know, you fresh meat coming in the door, and, you know, that kind of thing. I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for all of that.
Now, were you out at the time or no?
I was just really learning about myself and in the process of coming out. I kind of knew what I liked from very early on, but wasn't really sure how I wanted to address the environment that I was around with it. Because I was never, and that's something that I've talked about multiple times, I was never uncomfortable in my own self, ever. And a lot of people have had that problem. I've been really surprised by that. But I was never uncomfortable in my own self. I was more uncomfortable with the reception that I would get from the people around me. Because I grew up in the hood, and you know how the hood can be. So
where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Harlem, and we moved out of Harlem. I started first grade in the Bronx, and I grew up predominantly in the Bronx,
Where in the
South
Bronx?
to be exact, in the Southern Boulevard area, if you know anything about the city. So yeah, that was considered Fort Apache. That's that's where I grew up. And I was on. We first started on Bryant Avenue, and then we moved to Intervale, which still had a little bit of a remnant. It used to be a Jewish community that was starting to move out, and the Blacks and Latinos were starting to move in. And it was predominantly Latino. We were one of the first Black families to move into that area on Intervale. And so that's where I pretty much grew up.
Talk to us about music as a child. What music did you hear around the house as a child, and did that influence you at all?
Motown, Motown. My mom's music was actually it was still kind of heavily Motown influenced. She liked Sam Cooke, and she liked the Shirelles, and all of those old groups from like the 50s into the early 60s. That was her thing. And then as I started to come of age, Motown was really starting to bloom and flourish. And so my whole upbringing was Motown fused. From the early years, of this Diana Ross and the Supremes, the Marvelettes, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Gladys Knight and the Pips. All that music was the soundtrack of my youth.
Wow. And then from there, you started clubbing. You said you went clubbing at 13. Do you remember the club that you went to, the first one?
The first club that I went to was this bar in Manhattan called the Candy Store.
Do you remember where it was?
It was in
Uptown,
Midtown.
uptown, downtown?
Midtown. I'm tempted to say in the 50s on the east side, or just off of Fifth Avenue coming west. And it was an interesting place. It was a small kind of, I guess, townhouse setting. And there was a bar. It was, when I first walked in, I was like, oh hell, I have walked into exactly what I was expecting. Because at first when I walked in, it was just a bar. And a bunch of gay men standing around drinking at the bar. But they had a staircase, a winding staircase that went upstairs. And they had a dance floor upstairs. And once I went upstairs, after I came in and I went upstairs, that's where I got engulfed in the music. And I remember one of the first songs that I heard in that club, on that sound system, was Eddie Kendrick's "Girl, You Need to Change Your Mind," which was an interesting song to walk in on at that time. So I was like, wow. And people were just dancing and into it. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. I was like, this is great. This is what I'm talking about. I can get with this. Because I always loved music. I always loved to dance. And so all that uncomfortability, all that whatever I was going through, that went out the window. As soon as the music hit me, I was done. I was like, okay, this is it. We good. And that was the beginning.
And then when you would go out, would you go out solo, or would you go out always with friends?
I had a friend of mine that I used to run with, and he was a nut. He was a crazy dude, and he always was into something, was always like, we got to go here, we got to do this. So that was my running buddy. And he's the one that got me to go to the clubs. And between that and then I'm an artist, and I went to High School of Art and Design. And a lot of the kids at Art and Design were into the club scene. And so then I started going with groups of them to different parties. They were like, oh, we got this party going on. So one of the early clubs that I remember was this club called, it was I'm sure it was probably a grand ballroom, but they used to have parties there, dance parties. But it was, it was called a grand ballroom. And I'm
Where was it?
assuming, now that I'm older, now that I realize, what that was about, they were probably using it as a grand ballroom, but then, selling it out or paying it out for parties on the weekends or whatever, that kind of thing. So that was my next club that I remember. And that one I remember upon entering, and that was a thing back in those days. For some reason, a lot of movies, the themes from different movies were being played in clubs because they had like a great sound. They were kind of danceable. And the song that I remember going into the grand ballroom was the theme from The Men. And that was done by Isaac Hayes. And it was a great little dance tune. It actually still is kind of fun to dance, even by today's standards, because it had a great sound. So that was one of the early ones that I remember. And I can think of a lot of others.
The Grand Ballroom, do you remember where that was?
That was in the 50s. I actually listed addresses in the collection of places that I
Oh, you
left you.
did? Okay. I didn't catch the address. I just got the names. Okay, cool. And then from the Grand Ballroom, you went to Tagaris. What was Tagaris?
Oh, Tagaris?
Tagaris, yeah.
Tagaris, yeah. Wow, the Tagaris was kind of a mixed crowd, where some of the straight kids went, some of the gay kids went, everybody that was just into the scene went, and it was one of those places, and that was fun. There was definitely the whole era. The music was new, the sound was new, the whole dance scene itself, as it was at that time, the whole disco, what they called discotheque at that time, and then it just shortened to disco. But our scene was really danceable R&B. It wasn't really disco. There was some disco in the mix, but anything that was danceable, and if you notice in house music, it still kind of has that formula where it's like they'll play straight up house, but then they'll play house fused gospel, they'll play danceable R&B, they'll play world music, which they actually used to do in the 70s. Nicky Siano was legendary for doing that, playing world music where it was just like African rhythms and stuff, but it had a great dance beat, and so he would play it. If it had a great dance beat, he didn't care what it was, and that was kind of the makings of what we have today in house music, was that you'll find fusions of rock, you'll find fusions of all kinds of various types of music in the mix. At one point, I'm sure you noticed that there was a whole Middle Eastern kind of influence that was going on in house music. So we're pulling from all these different areas of what basically makes you feel like dancing. And it doesn't matter where it comes from. If you can dance to it, the DJ would play it.
Describe house music in one word.
Spiritual.
Explain that.
It actually goes, for me, it kind of goes back to the beginnings of Africa and the music. Let's put it like this. Me being an artist, everything is a form of expression. And before we had written language, we had musical language. We had the drums. And so the drums is still the universal communicator. Drums in anything, drums in everything, take the music to a different place. And so in that way, it links us. It grounds us. It also, music has been responsible for ending rifts between people. You know, the white and black groups, how did we get together? Through music. And, you know, it's still that way. It's one of the things that breaks down all barriers. It's one of those things that we all can understand no matter what language we speak. Um, it's a powerful, powerful feeling that can lift your mood, um, release your tension, um, warm your soul. And so these are all the spiritual attributes that I see in the music that is universal. It makes people smile. If they're in a mood, they lose that mood and they get lifted. It lifts you. And so that's the spiritual property, is that it lifts you. It lifts everyone. Doesn't just lift some of us, it lifts everyone.
That's a fair point. Talk to us about who is Nicky Siano? What is the gallery?
Okay. Nicky Siano is a DJ. He was the main, well, the owner of the gallery, which was an underground dance club. And how the underground dance clubs began in New York was that you couldn't have a party. Technically speaking, you couldn't have a party after 4 a.m. All bars, everything was, you know, because of the cabaret licenses and all of that. You couldn't party past that point. So somebody somewhere along the line found a way to get around that. And what they would do, they made it almost like a social club. And they would throw private parties. And those private parties, in a private party, you can go on until you don't feel like going on anymore because it's a private party. You're just having a party. And unless you're disturbing the peace, you can have a party. It's not really considered an official venue. So they would find these spaces, they would rent the spaces, and just buy the, you know, own the space and throw the private parties there every weekend. You had to be a member to join. That's where Paradise Garage got its whole membership idea or understanding. It comes from that history. And that's how you went to the party. And you would, you know, the parties originally started at, like, if I remember correctly, around 1 o'clock in the morning and went on till like 8, 9 in the morning. And that began to grow. And it also began to evolve from there. The Paradise Garage had the latest parties. Their parties would go to 1 in the afternoon from the night before. They would start at like 12 o'clock midnight, but they really didn't start jumping until 4 a.m. because all the other clubs would close and everybody would automatically, you know, flux to the to the Paradise Garage. So you get this influx of all these people coming in around 4 a.m. and the party would jump right about then. So I actually used to set my clock at home in the Bronx for like 3-ish, 2 to 3, go to sleep around 11, wake up around 2, get it together, and jump on the train to get into Manhattan around 3:30, 4 o'clock, you know, and that was the routine.
Wow. How did you balance having a job when you're coming from the club at 9 in the morning?
Well, that was, you know, when you're young, you can do almost anything. And it helped that it was the weekend. I mean, it was Fridays and Saturdays, the parties. So Sunday, you basically slept all day Sunday, and then For me, I wasn't even really working at that point. I was still a young teen. So I was going to school, and come Monday, I was good. I'd sleep all day Sunday or sleep half the day Sunday, get up, eat, and, freshen up and, get myself ready for Monday and be good.
Did you have, as a teenager, did you have to sneak out of the house to go to these clubs? Or did you have permission?
My mom was very liberal with me. My mom was very liberal with me. So no, I didn't have to sneak out. She'd ask me where I was. I would tell her what I was doing, and she would ask me questions about it. And as long as I wasn't getting in any kind of trouble, which is, I wasn't really. I was just going out dancing. She was cool with that. My mom liked to party too, so she wasn't mad at me for that. She was like, just as long as you safe, you're not, in anything dangerous. I assured her that I wasn't. She never had any problems out of me, or she never had anybody call her about something that happened or none of that. So she was cool. I was lucky.
Going back to the gallery, what made the gallery so special? What made the gallery different?
The sound. The sound system of the gallery, which was really taken from the Loft, which was the club that was directly around the corner. Actually, the Loft, and if I left you some, when you get a chance, you should watch it. It's Nicky Siano talking about how he started his club, the Gallery. And he was at the Loft and heard the sound system, and that whole Richard Long sound system is legendary. His bass, if you got the acoustics right, I try to describe it to people. The only way I can describe it that I think is as accurate as possible is imagine the best pair of Bose sound system, Bose earphones that you've heard, and take them off your ears and fill a room with it and have the same quality at a higher volume. The crispness, the cleanness, no reverberations of any kind, just pure sound that you felt in your body, in your core, through you. The music passed through you. That's the only way I can describe it. And when you were in those rooms, you were in a music vacuum. And that's really the best way I can describe how that sound quality hit you. And then it was also, because it was the beginnings of the whole dance club scene, there were all these innovations in sound quality, and I remember the whole beginning of tweeters outside of the speaker.
Really?
Yeah, that there was no such thing up until around, I'm tempted to say 74, 75, somewhere around there. And I forget who it was. I don't know if it was Richard Long or who it was that came up with that idea. And people weren't really fans of it originally. They were like, why are you taking the tweeters out of the speaker and you're going to put them around the room? And what's that supposed to do? And how is that supposed to work? And well, once it was done, we all got to understand from listening what that experience was like. It was definitely an amazing advent. The only other amazing advent that I can think of that really was a powerhouse musical experience was, and you hear a lot of people talk about it, was when Lolita Holloway's Hit and Run was released. That opening bass was unlike anything you've ever heard in a record. They had developed a system where they could deliver a richer bass, and that opening, that bass was the first time you heard that? First, and it blew everybody, needless to say, because it still hits people. It still hits people today, but you can imagine being the first time hearing it. Everybody was like, what just happened? What's going on with that song? What just happened? It was amazing. Then you had DJs playing with stuff. They would play with sound effects. They would just, it was a very creative time, a very experimental time, because everything was new. The sound systems and the turntables and mixing and, you know, playing with the music and doing things to see what you could do to expand the sound, enhance the sound. All of that was new. And so there was really no competition because everybody was learning from each other. It hadn't gotten to that place where everybody was starting to feel like they were the DJ of the moment. Everybody was the DJ of the moment. And so everybody was playing off of each other, bouncing ideas off of each other, just excited about the whole scene.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an amazing time to come of age. I tell that in a lot of, you know, I tell people it's no exaggeration. It's like I came into age at the birth of music as we know it today.
Mm.
It's been one of the richest experiences of my life, and it's kind of good and bad, because I'm sure you hear a lot of the old guard judge what's going on today, and it's because of what we come from. You know, when you've come from the best, you know when something's mediocre, you know when something's good but it's not great. You just know. And especially with me being an artist, sound is more than it's like I was saying, it's a communicator. And how you're communicating, I hear that. You know, and if you're not communicating, I hear that. You know, if you're just playing records to play records, I hear that. And my body responds to that, or it doesn't. You know, because again, like if you've had the best coffee in the world, somebody gives you a tepid ass, you know, instant coffee. If you're a connoisseur of coffee, you'll be like, this is some weak ass coffee. It might be good to you. I know you added some milk. I know you added some sugar, but what's missing is the quality of the coffee. That's just the experience. So I really had to, in order to continue to enjoy the scene, I had to kind of take it back a little bit. It's like, it is what it is. You got what you got. You're going to work with what you got, because there's really nothing, it's not going to be what it used to be. So snap out of it, get over it, move on. And that's kind of where I've been at from this point. But there's been some really interesting from people, especially in the sound department. There's this guy, Shorty, SBS Shorty is his kind of his moniker, I guess you could say. That's what he goes by, SBS Shorty. And he developed sound systems. And his geek fantasy is to reproduce digitally audio that's been that used to come from the old systems. That's his thing, is to capture that digitally. A lot of people say it can't be done. Of course, me being a creative person, I believe that there's nothing that can't be done. You just got to figure it out. It might take you a while, but you can figure it out. You know, if you hit on it by accident, whatever it's going to take, you can hit it. And he is driven to reproduce that. He's done a number of sound systems, all of which have been pretty amazing. So I'm counting on him to basically try to recreate that old sound that a lot of people feel has been lost in music.
when did the scene change when you realized it's not like it used to be? What was that turning point?
Well, the turning point, I would say, began in the 80s. Between the whole death of disco thing and all of that, the beginnings of right-wing influences between Nixon and then what's his name, the other one, um,
Reagan?
Reagan, exactly. Um, the whole spirit changed. Um, I was never a fan because of the type of club that the club history that I had come from. I was never a fan of Studio 54. Studio
Why?
54, I thought was outrageous to me. How dare you have me come to your club? You're trying to get patrons. I'm going to stand there and I'm going to wait for you to choose me, and then I'm supposed to pay you. Now I could see you choosing me if you was gonna let me in for free, then you get to choose me all because it's your club. You know, you let me in for free. That's fine. But you're gonna charge me to go in, and you're gonna judge me coming in the door. I don't think so. Especially since all of the clubs that the Loft. A lot of people don't notice about the Loft, but Mancuso used to act. Mancuso was the owner of the Loft. Um, And he actually used to have a credit list of people that he allowed to come into his club on credit. Who does that? But that was the 60s mindset, is that the music is for the people. We trying to get the people here. We want to give people good vibes, good parties, good vibes. It was that mindset. That mindset changed with the beginnings of the 80s me generation and Studio 54, and trying to feel fabulous and trying to be something that everybody wanted to be a star, and all that nonsense. And I felt like that was really it, for lack of a better description. I really felt like that was white people shit. I was like, we ain't got nothing to do with all of that. We can trying to get sweaty. We want to get our dance on. We're not trying to be cute. We're not trying to two-step. We're not trying to, throw bags in the middle of the floor and swing our hair around and all that nonsense. Take pictures and all that shit. No, we ain't trying to do none of that. If you ain't here to dance, get up out my way. It's time. And it's not time for any of that. So that was the thing that I came from, and so I was never. Now, interestingly enough, the two times, there was only two, the two times that I got talked into going to Studio 54, I didn't have any problem getting in. But I went with people, I guess, that go there frequently or whatever, or they knew somebody or whatever. But I told them, I was like, if there's any shit at all, if there's any pause at all at the door, you're gonna be here doing whatever you got to do by yourself, because I'm not having it. I'm not standing around, I'm not waiting for somebody to decide that I can pay them. I'm not doing that. So that was the thing. And yet, in the two times that I went, fortunately, we didn't have a problem. So it was like, okay. But even once I was in there, it was a scene. It was a scene. It was theater. It was, tinsel and girls dancing topless, just regular girls on table dancing topless. And, people just carrying on. It was just a whole debaucherous scene. People doing drugs and people having sex in certain areas. That was another thing that you could run into in a number of different clubs, is people in certain areas of the club, you might run into them just getting busy. It was a very special time. it was definitely sex, drugs, and rock and roll in that order, pretty much.
And how would you contrast it with the current, how would you describe the current state of clubbing today? Well,
Um,
forget COVID, but say like right before COVID. How would you
yes,
describe the current state of clubbing?
I would say it's a little bit more PC.
Explain that.
Um, well, nobody's having sex up in the clubs. You're not lighting up joints and all of that stuff because places got shut down as a result of doing that. Um, I used to go to the Paradise Garage in the very beginning when they were spiking the punch. They had to stop doing that um, because, of course, that could be a situation that could get the club closed. And once they realized that, they were like, okay, we can't really do that anymore. But that's how it started. Is that you were in there, and he used to. Nicky Siano used to do it. We all got the the 411 on when the spike when the spike hit the punch. So there was a lot going on in that respect that changed. I would say that the 80s changed it. Giuliani and his bullshit changed it because he started busting clubs, in the middle of the party. The lights would come on, the police would be up in there, and that was all during the 80s and 90s, all that nonsense of, people starting to do it really was, and I can understand that. It was parents that were concerned about their children. The children were coming home zooted on all kinds of stuff. And sometimes I guess, you had people that were really either had to be sent to a hospital because they had done too much or something. And people like, what is this place you go into? And what's going on over there? So of course that gets reported to the police and the police have to do something about it. So that's kind of how that came to fruition. And then they started cracking down. Steve Rebel got busted. Then they went after Limelight. All those places in the 80s really started to get hassled to clean up their act. And that changed the whole, in order to stay alive, the nightlife had to be more responsible. They had to really kind of like, no, you can't come in here and throw your drugs on the table and start snorting and shit and all that craziness that, used to go on back in the day. If you have something that you want to do it before you get here. Make sure that you can manage what you're doing or you won't come in. And it got like that. So that's really pretty much where it has stayed since then, is that you never know when somebody's undercover in your club. So you don't want to have anything going on that could cause the party, everybody loves their party. And of course, everybody's making money off that party, who runs it. So it's like nobody's trying to mess up their thing. So it's understandable. So that's really, I would say, what the changes were that came about, is that things became a little bit more regimented, a little bit more controlled. Now, because of the changes in the marijuana laws and all of that, you can kind of, you can smoke marijuana. You still can't smoke cigarettes. That's the only other thing that I think that I really personally enjoyed was when they stopped smoking in clubs, because you used to come home smelling like an ashtray. So they did stop that, and I was kind of grateful for that part, is that they made everybody kind of who wanted to smoke go outside or do whatever. You could still smoke, you just couldn't do it up in the club. And so that's how that changed.
Having been a connoisseur of clubs past and present,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to design the perfect club experience today, what would that be like?
I would I would follow Nicky Siano's format in lighting and sound, because he had he had theatrical lights in the gallery. So he had this ability to manipulate the lights to the music. And now you have a bunch of flashing lights and stuff, and you have all these light effects in clubs. but they kind of do their own thing. They're kind of just flashing and going on, and the music is going on, and it's this spectacle of lights and sound, but they really don't correlate. In Nicky's club, the lighting and everything, the light effects, the sound was all a part of a cohesive effect. And so if you had a driving beat, the lights would follow that. When you had music that faded in and faded out, the lights faded in and faded out. So the lights went along with the music. I bring that back because I thought that it created a theater of life within the experience. And it was amazing. Another thing that he had was he had a system, and I'm sure that there's a technical name for it in the sound industry. It became, at least it was his thing, he was able to take elements from the song and play them as individual instruments. So let's say Love Hangover. I'm gonna give you a perfect example of what he did with Love Hangover that I will never forget as long as I live, because I've never heard anybody do it since. He had, you know how you go through a whole period in where you go through the mad rush of the club and everything, and then they have this kind of calm down period where they, you know, either stop the music or slow the music down, and they'll create wind effects and they'll do all of this stuff, but they kind of take a little bit of an intermission of sorts where you can go to the bathroom, you can take a minute to just breathe, calm yourself down, or get ready for the next hurdle kind of thing. So he would do that. And in this one instance, he decided that his comeback record was going to be Love Hangover. And you heard the beginning of Diana Ross's doon, 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 in the beginnings, and you know she's getting ready to do her thing. You know she's going into the lyrics. I don't need a cure. I don't need the cure. And then it gets to the breaking point, and he did this thing that I don't know how he did it, but at the point of the break where it goes din 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 din, din over, he brought the pitch up on the din 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 din, din to the point where it screeched like the sound of the scene in Psycho. That he did it like that, and then he went boom, and it was like a explosion, and then it said over, and then over echoed, and then all of a sudden all you heard was and it just kept building and rising and building, and you didn't hear the rest of the music. That's all you heard was that. And then all of a sudden behind that, as that started to escalate and fill the room, you started to hear the ding, 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 ding. And then that started to get louder and louder. And then meanwhile, it still got, and people were screaming. People was like, what? It blew everybody away. And I've never heard anybody do it since. So that's the kind of musical magic that was going on that I would love to see come back. Nobody's really experimenting. Everybody's kind of going to formulas and playing their little formulas, and that's how they play, and that's their thing. And you hear all these DJs are like, you know, well, I play like this and I do like that. And it's like, yeah, all right, but you know, where's the artistry in that? I mean, there's only but so much of a formula. And even back then, they would play the same music. They would play a lot of, you know, they play what people wanted to hear. They play the favorite stuff. They play new stuff. But in order to keep it fresh, sometimes they tease you with it. They would play the middle of a song and then wouldn't play it. Yeah, you know that experience when you're like getting ready to get, then he like goes to the song, you're like, oh hell. And then, you know, just at the end of the night, he'll come back with it and hit you with it hard and just break you down. It's like, you know, that kind of stuff. You don't have too many DJs that kind of do that anymore. It's like, guys, it's really about where's the artistry in what you're doing? You know, anybody can play a record, anybody can mix a record. you know, if you're going to play with the EQ, know what you're doing. There's a reason why you bring the bass up. There's a reason why you take it down. It's supposed to be expressing something. You don't just do it to do it, you know. Um, so all of those little nuances, all of those little things that are part of the impact of the auditory experience is what I would bring back. And I'd bring back that theater of it to go along on top of it. And I think that that would definitely be an advent unlike what anybody's experiencing today. And I think it would really take us to another place, because it would be all new, especially to these generations now, to this generation, it would be all new to them. And my goal would be to get you to put your phone down and dance, because that's all you can do right about now. The music is catching you like that, and you just can't stand there and not do anything. That's what I would like to see happen. That's what I would do if I had a club.
I love that. Let's talk about dancing.
Yes.
How do you dance to club music? How do you dance to house music? Is there a proper way to dance? Describe dancing.
Oh, okay. There historically, this goes into this goes into kind of more than just dancing, because there's the gay scene and there's the straight scene. And, you know, in the mid 70s to the late 70s, we merged because, you know, the straight girls wanted to get in with their gay friends, and then they started bringing their boyfriends, and boyfriends wasn't comfortable, so then they started bringing their boys, and before you know it, you know, you had a bunch of straight people up in your gay club looking you up and down like you wasn't supposed to be there, and you're like, what the fuck? And you're like, mind your business. Go, what are you doing? And a lot of people really didn't like that in the beginning. It caused a lot of stuff, which is actually how Friday nights at Paradise Garage began. Because originally it was just Saturday nights, but the straight people started filling up the gay space, which the gay people were very upset about. And then the straight people were like, well, we like this party too, but you know, we would like it a lot better if I didn't have to stand there and watch two guys make out half the night, you know, because I'm here to, you know, that's not my thing, and I like to meet girls, and so what can you do for us? And so they split the nights up. Now, ironically, because we love the party so much, a lot of the straight kids that were comfortable with being around gay people or whatever, they would still come to the Saturday night parties. And the gay kids that didn't, you know, it's like, I grew up with straight people. I don't give a fuck. This is a party that needs to be had. And Friday, you know, it'll straight, I'll mind my business, I'll do my thing. And so you still got gay influx in the straight parties and straight influx in the gay parties. Now, I said all of that to say that with straight people, dancing has always been a competition kind of thing. And they always want the latest dances and all of that kind of thing. The gay scene was really more about immersing yourself in the music and letting the music take you where it takes you. And however that makes you feel and however that makes you dance, that's how you dance. And so that's been my experience, is that I let the music tell me what it wants me to do. And sometimes I feel it in my head, sometimes I feel it in my feet, I feel it in my shoulders, I feel it in my hips. Different songs give me different things. Some make you feel like marching, some make you feel like swirling, some make you feel like flailing your hands around, some make you bob your head, some make you do all of that, depending on what it is. I would say that that's been my influence. I don't like competitive dances. I'm not one of those stand around and watch people dance in a circle thing. It's like, I'm not there to dance in a circle. I'm not there to show you anything. I'm not trying to show you nothing. I'm trying to be me and do me and be in my space and have my musical experience within the context of everything else that's going on around me. But this is really not about you, it's about me. And so it's a very different vibe from the two. Now, they've developed, I'd say largely the straight community has developed house dancing. It's a whole way of moving and dancing and doing this whole thing, floor work and all of this stuff that really kind of comes from the old hip hop, loft influences and all of that. So it's kind of a revisited, revamped version of all of that. And that's become what a lot of people consider house dancing. And it's like, that's fine for people that want to do that. Then there's the people that love the house scene, that are part of the house scene and just dance to house music the way house music makes them feel. And there's kind of been this back and forth depending on who you talk to about about who belongs there and who doesn't, or who's, all that kind of stuff. And me coming from the era that I came from, it's like if we all understand the music and we all can relate to the music, we all belong there, period. It's none of this, don't bring that nonsense in here. As far as I'm concerned, if somebody's feeling the vibes, if they don't dance the way you think they should dance, let them do what they're doing. They feeling the music, they're in their space, they're loving the music. Let them live. They're getting their life, let them live. Leave them alone. If somebody's acting crazy, as long as they're not falling all over you, be mindful of your space. Don't just act like you up in there by yourself. You good. That's all that matters to me in regard to that. So that's where I'm at in regard to dancing.
I love that. At the same time of the rise of, the garage and other clubs, there was also the ball scene.
Yeah.
What is a ball? What is a house? What is a mother? Talk to us about the ball scene.
Oh, wow. Okay. The ball scene originally began from the 50s into the 60s. And it was a place for, since beauty pageants were so popular in America, and the drag queens wanted to feel beautiful, wanted to be beautiful, wanted to see themselves and honor each other's beauty. And so they said, we're gonna start these balls. We're gonna have our own thing, and we're gonna have our own beauty contests. And so that's really what the balls were, where they were originally pageants for drag queens and for transvestites. That's what they were originally. And the gay community would frequent them and support them and all of that stuff. And but it was really initially all about drag and in the world of transvestites. There's a really great movie called The Queen that was made in the 60s that covered the underground ball scene. And if you ever, it's actually free on YouTube. If you ever get a chance to watch it, you should. And at the same time, I guess because of the fact that it was the only thing in such a hostile environment that people had to express themselves. It also became a very tough, sometimes vicious competition. Fights sometimes would happen. A lot of the ethnic people that were involved felt like there was shade from the white queens, who would, if they were judging, you would simply not get the points that you should have gotten simply from being Latina or Black or whatever it was. When, as far as someone who was participating, because it's like, I looked just as fabulous as any one of them, if not more so. All of these people did their own stuff, their own makeup. They went home, they sold all of their outfits, all of those gowns and everything. A lot of them they made themselves, or they had seamstresses or friends that were seamstresses help them put together the outfits. But it was a real production that really came from just the desire to feel amazing, and to see yourself in your own little world as being on top of that world. You know, it was being a big fish in a small pond. And everybody wanted to be that big fish, and everybody was clamoring to be that big fish, and everybody was kind of clawing and scratching to be that big fish. And when you became one of those big fishes, then you became legendary in that audience. You know, people began to know you. You know, you became the Beyonce or the whoever of that. Whoever of that crowd. You know, whoever you thought of as the ultimate whoever. You know, you became the Naomi Campbell of that crowd. You know, that kind of thing. And then it started to. I'm not sure how or what happened to cause the evolution to include femme queens and then just gay men in general. But it did start to evolve in the 70s. It may have begun with the whole idea of pairs, of having, you know, the drag queen have a butch guy to look like her husband or boyfriend or whatever, be a part of the walk. And, you know, then it's like, well, why don't we have a category for them? You know, because you got some really great looking guys that would come up with that, you know, would pass, you know, whatever. And it's like, why don't we create, I guess, you know, I'm just assuming that that's how that began, because that's kind of what I see in the history, see it kind of evolve from there. And then that opened it up. Then, as you know, in the 80s, when it became all about materialism and who could get this and who could get that, then the whole thing of making your clothes, that kind of faded out in the mid 70s to the late 70s. And then it became all about designer stuff. And, you know, you got the butch queens coming up in there wearing Elsa Peretti this and, you know, Stephen Burrows that, and, you know, all that kind of thing. And the ones who couldn't afford it all of a sudden started developing really crafty ways to shoplift. And, and it became a real problem. At one point, there was this whole era in New York. I don't know where else it was going on, but it was a real problem in New York that they actually put it in news. It was in the Times that late at night, they were getting these groups of bands of gay people that were going and bashing the windows of Bonwood Tellers or places like that and doing a snatch and grab. And they would go like at 3 and 4 in the morning when, of course, nobody was out there. They'd run in a, you know, I guess they, you know, through the course of the day, they would spot what it is they wanted, where they wanted it, and they would plan that night they were going to hit it. And they would actually bash the windows of Bloomingdale's or whoever and go in and take the stuff. And that went on for a while until they started, you know, cracking down. And the police started realizing that was going on, and people were getting busted and jailed and everything else, you know, doing major time for doing that. So that kind of shut that down. But you had people coming up in balls with full-length furs, with designer everything, especially when it was these categories like, you know, rich woman for tea or some category like that. And they would break the category down. You know, you had to look like a rich woman with all of the, you know, whatever that entailed. And those kids would come for it, and it would be amazing. I mean, I have a friend of mine that she used to do the balls years ago, and she was a dog trainer, and she came with an ocelot.
I don't
And
even
the
know what
first,
that is.
an ocelot is, think of a greyhound dog. Ocelots are kind of in that shape. There's a long snout, elongated dogs. She came down the runway, with the fur and and she looked like a rich white woman. She won. And it was like that. So that's really what now the houses were basically the mother and the father of the house were basically the seniors of the house. They are the ones that dictated. They had the most history in the ball scene, and they were the ones that were schooling the young people. And so that's what the house was about. Was the house was a place for you to go and get schooled on the art of walking balls and being in the house. You had to qualify to be in the house, so you had to know. You had to have the skills. You had the vogue. You had to, know how to present yourself when you pulled yourself together. You needed to be pulled together. They would look you up and down. They check you. If you was looking tacky, they was like, no, 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 honey, you can't go out there with that shit on. Take them sneakers off. No, we don't do that. This is the look. And they would groom them, and they would, put them through all of the changes to make them appear what they needed to appear to win balls. And of course, each house wanted to be the one that won the maximum amount of trophies, because then you became the it house as a result. And so that's where that all came from. And then battling, of course, house against house. You know, I remember now a lot of the guys, because we are a creative community, a lot of the people that were in some of these houses, some of them were professional dancers and everything else, so they could do things, just acrobatically and everything else that So when you ever wanted to have a major ball, you sent those troops out, because you knew that they could contort, they could do things, they could split, they could stand on their head, they could do whatever they could do and hold it, because everything was about being able to hold poses, which takes us back to the original idea and the name of voguing, which was you wanted to be able to capture the effect of a photo shoot in Vogue, in the magazine Vogue, which was a high fashion magazine. And so, each move that you made, each stance that you took needed to be a picture in and of itself. And so that's why, whenever you move this way, move that way, it would do like a pop thing, where they pop it into place here, pop it into place here, pop it into place, pop it into place, picture, snap, 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 and that's where that whole thing came of that breakdown of movement. And it was really actually how models used to model in the 60s and 70s originally. They would try to, freeze poses of different kinds so that the photographer could capture the right photo. And so they started bringing that into the ball scene of, I'm going to give you, if I got face, I'm going to give you different angles of face. I'm going to give you different angles of hair and face. And, if I'm presenting body, I'm going to, twist the body so that you can see, what the hips are doing, what the legs are doing, give you legs, give you arms, they'll do something, they'll do whatever, frame the face and all of this stuff. And, then you get judged. And based on what you get judged, and that's where the drama began. Because depending on who was on the panel, whoever had enemies or something, it's like they would get into fights. That bitch ain't never gonna give me a 10, blah, 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 she don't like me, and all of that. So sometimes it could be fun, it could be amusing, it could be awesome, and sometimes it could be scary. Because I remember one ball that I actually went to, and I left early, and this was at Sound Factory. They had a ball at Sound Factory years ago, the House of Africa, and I forget who the other house was, and they got into it and started tearing shit up. And of course, they were not welcome back at Sound Factory after that because they went up in there and showed out. But yeah, it could get dicey. It could get really nasty. I had a friend of mine that I knew years ago that got jumped, and she's in a wheelchair now. They broke her back because somebody was jealous of her walking and realness, and she looked realer than, and all that stuff. So it could be really. It had wonderful aspects, and then it had dark aspects to it too. Because a lot of these kids were from the hood, and a lot of them had hood mentalities. A lot of them grew up fighting and had no problem fighting. And so yeah, you got all of those elements in the mix. And it didn't really change until Madonna discovered it and said, wow, this is an amazing thing. Why doesn't anybody know about it? And then she kind of took, it's like, what is this whole thing you're doing? And, she befriended people in the House of Extravaganza because she used to go to Sound Factory years ago when she was first starting out. She was a party goer, and she would go to different parties. She used to go to Sound Factory, and she got to know some of the kids from the Extravaganzas, and they introduced her to the ball scene, and she thought it was fascinating. And she was like, well, why don't we do something with that? Why don't we bring some element of the public? And then that's when Vogue happened. Now, interestingly enough, that brought it to the forefront, but it also, Suzanne Barsh, which was a club goer in the whole Limelight era and that whole scene, when the AIDS crisis struck, she was like, the politicians aren't doing anything. Nobody's doing anything. We have to do something. People are dying. We need to find resources. People are not working. We've got to do something. So she actually adopted balls and took it into the white world from that whole element and created a whole real ball atmosphere with people paying real money to go up in these parties. And she got celebrities to come. She got, she started a whole thing, and it was kind of on the tail end of what Madonna started. They kind of bounced off of each other and created a whole other thing with the ball scene that became kind of a universal thing at that point. So that's really the ball story and how it kind of developed and evolved, and kind of how it went from being this underground thing that really nobody knew about except people that were in the gay world, to being a universal knowledge, and having people in Germany and stuff learn how to Vogue, and you see voguing teams in Australia and in New Zealand, and all of this. It's like, it's fascinating.
What is the Sound Factory?
The Sound Factory, the Sound Factory tried to take up and become the next club that got as close as it was going to be able to the Paradise Garage. They couldn't do it. It was an amazing club. It was a great club. I think, if I remember correctly, they actually got some of the sound system from the Paradise Garage. They got some of that Richard Long sound system. But, the times had changed. The circumstances had changed. Manhattan had changed. What it cost to have a club changed. And so you couldn't really do a Paradise Garage anymore. Paradise Garage, when it first started, um, the reason it was called Paradise Garage, it's that it was a parking garage. It was a whole split level parking garage, which they gutted and made into a club. And they started it off by doing, oddly enough, I mean, they put the sound system in areas of the place that they had developed enough, and they started having construction parties. And basically, you danced on the sawdust that was on the floor from them working and scraping and doing woodwork and all of that stuff. There was sawdust all over the floors, and so that helped people slip and slide on the floors, and they was using the sawdust to dance on. So those were the construction party, and that helped pay for the Paradise Garage getting built. But what was different about the Paradise Garage, which wasn't able to be duplicated, was the spirit in which they built it. All of the money that was made from the Paradise Garage, well, not all of it, of course, because they had to pay people, and all of that. But they took rather than taking a big profit from it for themselves, which, they took a profit, but they didn't take all the profit. They kept putting money back into the club to expand and develop it. They wanted it to be a haven initially. Now remember, it was a couple. It was
Brody,
yes, Brody and
Mel Sharon.
Mel Sharon. Thank you. And those two wanted to create a place to get away from everything in the world and just be yourself, be free, have a space to just live like you want to live, do what you want to do, be how you want to be. That was the spirit. And so everything that they did around that club was for that. And making money from it was a part of it, but it was a part of it to grow the club, to make the club more of what they were trying to make it for the people. So it was the money making for the people, and the more money that they got from the people. And it also made people want to give the money because they liked what they were getting from the space. And they offered you things for your money. You had fruit all night, and you had the movie theater that you could watch. And there was all this stuff going on that just wasn't going on in any of the clubs that we ever knew. And it just kept growing. After a while, they developed the crystal room, and then they developed the roof sun deck. Whose club had a sun deck? Nobody's club had a sun deck, and it was just like all these things that they just kept doing, and it kept people talking about it. And then people from Europe were starting to hear this, like, this is a club in New York. When you come, you got to check this shit out. It's just a whole other thing going on here. And it really started to grow and develop, and that's what happened. And that's why people were really gutted when it closed, because it wasn't just the closing of a club, it was the closing of an era. It was the end of the 70s. It was the beginning of the 80s, me generation, and all of this materialism, and the whole dream of the 60s and peace, love, and harmony pretty much died right there. That was the last of that. Everything else from that point on was about profit and about pay me and then I'll give you what I got and that's all you get. And then, it just, the whole spirit changed, the whole attitude changed. Up until that point, I mean, when's the last time you got a drink ticket from anybody's club to welcome you and say, thank you for your patronage? Hasn't happened since the 80s, has it? There you go. That's my point. And that's what changed. And it hasn't changed back since.
It sounds like, I also wanted to make the distinction. You brought up a distinction about underground clubs.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that to folks in terms of these aren't just the traditional Friday, Saturday night clubs where Joe Blow just goes out and has a drink and listens to, whatever artist of the moment. Explain the
Right.
difference between a regular club and sort of our community. Explain that to folks.
Well, the underground clubs, what made them underground was the fact that they were technically illegal. Um, but that was the first thing that made it underground, was that you had to know somebody to know about them at all. And then you'd find out it was kind of like your own little family secret of sorts. You and your people frequented that club, and you picked who you brought there because you wanted to keep the atmosphere how you liked it. And they had to become a member eventually. You couldn't keep coming in there as a guest before. It's like, okay, you're gonna become a. It's the third time I see you at this door. You know what you're doing. Kind of thing. And you were encouraged to become a member. It was usually a fee for the membership. It wasn't usually astronomical because they weren't doing astronomical back then. You paid $5 as a member to get up in the club. You paid 10 as a non-member, which at that time was a lot. It's like, oh my God, $10 to get up in this club. And then when you went to Paradise Garage, it jumped up it went from 15 to 20. And that was, at that time, that sounded like $40 or $50 to people back then. But once you got in there and you saw how much they gave you, you're like, well, I just paid for everything. That's all. Is that I paid for, I got movies, I got drinks all night long. I didn't have to be thirsty. I didn't have to, go through no check. It's like they serve you fruit. In the morning, sometimes they give you like toast and, bagels and stuff. So they served you breakfast. I mean, so, that little $25 or $20 or whatever it was worth it. So people weren't barking too much about that. Even though they were like, yeah, it's steep, but it's worth it. And that was people's feeling. Plus that sound system and everything else that was going on up in there. It was just like, no, you don't understand. I don't care what it's costing. You need to get up in there and see what's going on up in there. So it was like that. The other thing was the hours, and the music that was played. You heard occasionally some pop music, but it really wasn't. The genre of music was different. They played stuff that you didn't hear in popular R&B dance club. You didn't hear that in the neighborhood place, or you didn't hear that version. They came out with these versions, and sometimes the DJs. That was the beginning. That's one of the things that Danny Krivit became legendary for, was that he became known as the guy from the 70s who actually started the elongated versions of songs that you like. It was especially like if it was the break in Bra, Simandi's Bra, he extended that and you only heard it in that club, which was really where the house name came from, because when that started in certain clubs, you got the in-house version of that tune, and they started doing that. And then of course, you had Larry here in New York, and Frankie Knuckles ended up moving down to Chicago, and he and Larry were good friends. Larry was actually the one that talked him into going to Chicago. He was like, "Ain't nothing happening for you here. Go see what you can do there, and see what that is." So between the two of them, they kind of spearheaded the whole house music beginnings, and then it kind of developed from there. But that started with the whole in-house DJs making their own in-house versions of things that only they had, and that's when the whole DJ competition started. Was in that era when DJs started to produce. they started to expand their roles, not only just being DJs, but started to get into the actual development of the music itself, and taking the music and giving it extra, or giving it a punch, or bringing in live performers of the music and recording it and making that their version of it that was just under their house. And I don't know if they would pay the artist or what, but Lolita Holloway would have, Nicky Siano's version of Hit and Run or whatever, where she says a little extra something, and you'd only get that in the gallery. You wasn't going to get that in the loft or wherever else you went. That was in his house, and it became like that. So that's where that kind of competition began, and alliances began, and DJ groups that that's their group, and this is this group, and each people belong to their own groups, and it became that kind of thing. That's when they became a little competitive. And I think in a way, that's where it kind of lost something, because let it be free. Let free it up. Free the music up. If somebody else gets a copy of it, then everybody's hearing it. So what? It's still going to be your version. If they take your version and they make a better version, then that gives you something to compete against. Compete against that, rather than hoarding and trying to keep people from having your stuff and, all of that.
We're talking about clubbing and nightlife,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel that there's something bigger going on. It sounds to me, and I'd like you to expound on this if indeed it's true, that it was more about community and safe space. Talk about that.
Definitely, definitely. It started out as a community and safe space for gay people. Then it evolved into a community for many of the disenfranchised, gay, straight, whoever. Um, it became more of that, where it's like, if you knew how to act, you'd be welcome. As long as you don't come in here, fighting and cutting and shooting or doing nothing crazy. We trying to come up in here and let all that craziness that's going on in the world go. If you good with that, you good with us. Come in, be at peace, do your thing. But you'll notice that as a result of that mindset, which still kind of pretty much exists even to this day, even the cops will tell you, the ones that know about the music scenes, they were like, oh, house parties, we don't have no problems with them. We don't have to work. They like when there's house parties, because there's not going to be no stabbing, shooting, nobody, fighting and, getting cut up, or there's not going to be craziness. It's not going to be what you might get at a rap party or, hardcore or whatever. We don't have that. We don't come from that, and we're not trying to really support that or nurture that in any kind of way, shape, or fashion. So I would say that that's still kind of the order of the day today, is that, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's become global, is because through the music, it's become a great unifier. And it actually, surprisingly, in South Africa, has almost become like the music of South Africa. House music has become the music of South Africa. And you got a lot of really amazing music and brilliant artists coming out of Africa right now. And to me, that comes back to the spiritual part of it, is it seems like we all evolved from Africa, and Africa's calling us all back. And it's amazing that way.
I love that. Let's do word association. I will talk about it. I'll name a club.
Uh-huh.
Tell me, describe it in a word or a sentence. Yeah, well, and I'll just go through a whole bunch of them, right? So the limelight.
Limelight, freedom.
Ooh, You got to stop right there. Unpack that.
Well, the limelight okay, I'm thinking of there's two limelights. There was the limelight on 7th Avenue years ago in the 70s. And that was the one that I was referring to. The one that was done in the church, which actually, because I was raised Southern Baptist, that scared the hell out of me. It's like, I don't know about all of that. That building might fall down on people in any second. I'm not trying to go up in there and do all of some of what I heard goes on up in there, up in somebody's church. I'm just not doing that. Wasn't raised like that. I don't know about all that. But I ended up finally going, and I actually loved it. But I went towards the tail end of it just before they closed. And that was really just to kind of get a sense of what was going on in there. I just wanted to know what goes on in this place. And it was pretty fascinating what went on in there. But the limelight that I was talking about was one of the clubs that existed right off of Christopher Street on 7th Avenue. And it ended up becoming a restaurant right on that corner. It was actually where Starbucks is now. That used to be the limelight. And it was one of the more popular clubs for the gay kids of the community of that time years ago to go to and be free. So that's why I said freedom. But I was referring to that limelight.
I'm glad we clarified that. Ice Palace 57.
Ice Palace 57, community. And the reason I say community is because everybody that was hanging out in Manhattan, wherever you were coming from, it was a tea dance in the afternoons on Sundays. And so everybody that was hanging out, all of the kids that loved the club scene, that was hanging out at the fountain in Central Park or at the beach, Reese Beach or wherever, and had gotten their tan on or whatever, everybody came by mid-afternoon. They were leaving the beach, they were leaving the park, and they were funneling themselves into the Ice Palace.
Crisco Disco.
Crisco. Debauchery. Debauchery. Crisco Disco was a great dance party. It was a little dark and it was a little dirty in that pick you up and get up in a corner and feel up and make out. And that was one of the first places that I saw two people on the dance floor while we're dancing, a white couple. They ended up, rolling around on the floor. Next thing I know, she had pulled down his zipper and was giving him head on the dance floor while everybody's dancing around. And we're dancing, trying to, I almost tripped over them. I turned around, I was like, oh shit. That was Crisco Disco. Crisco Disco, the DJ booth, and I know there has to be pictures of it. If you can find pictures of it, if I find them, I'll send them to you. Crisco Disco had a Crisco can as the DJ booth, a big, huge Crisco can as the DJ booth. And back in the old gay days, what Crisco was used for. So it attracted a wide array of the gay community, including the Crisco crowd. But it was a little bit of some of everybody up in there. It was kind of similar to the Mine Shaft in that way. Is that it was the Mine Shaft people, and then all of the people that just wanted to party and didn't care what was going on in the Mine Shaft. They were gay, we're gay. Just go up in there and dance, mind your business, and get out. So that's how that was.
Gigi Barnum Room.
Gigi Barnum Room was a fascinating place. Alternative, I guess, would be my word for um, Gigi, which was short for Gilded Grape, which the Gilded Grape used to be a drag bar, and the men who loved them. It was a place on 8th Avenue in the 50s, and it was a small bar originally. And then Gigi Barnum Room, the guy, I guess, made enough money from all of that and opened this space, which actually became the Peppermint Lounge later on. It's same space. Um, but it originally started as Gigi Barnum Room, and they had kind of hustler boys that were up on trapezes, and they had a trapeze thing. And that's the Barnum part of it, is that you had boys in little skivvies flipping and trying their best to do acrobatic stuff on these swings and stuff up above everybody dancing. God forbid, no, fortunately nobody fell. They did have a net to catch them in between them and people dancing underneath them. So hopefully that net was gonna hold up. Nobody had to take the chance of finding out. Fortunately, nobody fell, but it was that was the atmosphere there, and it was still a predominantly drag audience, and then everybody who was comfortable being around drag queens and liked drag queens, their friends, and gay kids and whoever else, but it was mainly their club and the guys who dated them, or it was their scene, and we were welcome to be a part of it. But as long as you held your place, you'd be all right. Don't be trying to take the drag queens, man, or none of that stuff. You'll be all right.
Starship Enterprise.
Starship Enterprise was on 42nd Street. If I remember correctly, between 8th and 9th Avenue, or between 9th and 10th, I forget which one. Huge club, was the beginning of those big mega clubs, and had all this futuristic stuff. That's why they called it Star. It was kind of designed to have like a star spaceship-ish kind of experience. And it originally started out as a gay club. And as with so many of our gay clubs, the gay clubs would attract the gay guys. The gay guys would bring their little straight girlfriends, and the straight girlfriends would bring their little boyfriends. And before you know it, the straight boyfriends was bringing their boys up in there so that they didn't have to feel uncomfortable being in there by themselves. And next thing you knew, it was a mixed crowd, and then it became a predominantly straight crowd, because the gays was like, I'm not doing this, I'm out of here. Whenever you get too many straight folks, it kind of was like white flight when you get too many blacks in the neighborhood. It was gay flight whenever too many straights came in, and then the club would turn over and it become a straight club, or predominantly straight. And if you wanted to be gay and be up in there, you just had to deal with that. So that's how Starship Enterprise was. But I had fun there regardless, because I mean, most of my upbringing, I grew up around straight people. I wasn't uncomfortable being myself around gay people. It's like, if you can't handle it, leave. If you're not comfortable with what I'm doing, you ain't got to be around me. Go on over across the room somewhere, or whatever. Leave me alone. Let me do me. You do you, and we'll be good. That's basically how that went, and that's how I grew up. And so I was never really put off by being in a straight crowd. As long as they were okay with me, I was okay with them. You leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. We'll all dance together. You'll go home, I'll go home, and we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Sound Factory Bar.
Sound Factory Bar was how could I describe it? Part two. It was a smaller version. It actually, again, if I remember correctly, I believe it took over the space that used to be the Peppermint Lounge. It ended up closing. The Peppermint Lounge was kind of this. It had originally started as kind of a punk new wave kind of thing. And then that kind of came and went, and that closed up. And then the Sound Factory bar, after Sound Factory closed, they wanted to kind of keep that spirit of Sound Factory alive. And so they opened Sound Factory Bar, which was a smaller version of that club experience. It really was a new club, but it tried to do that and be that, and it ended up becoming its own thing, which was fun. It was a fun place to be. It was a good party. But that's what I'd say is part two.
The tunnel.
The tunnel, innovation. Innovation because the tunnel was literally an old subway tunnel that they blocked and made into a club. And actually, if you walk to the end of the back of the club, you could actually see where the old tunnel continued. It was an old railway tunnel that was underground that just became defunct. And they were like, let's do something with this space. I know, how about we make it into a club? So that's what the tunnel was. The tunnel was a underground tunnel, old railway station that they made into a club. And it was a fun part. That was another fun party. That was where me and Vin Diesel crossed paths. Vin Diesel used to be a bouncer there at the tunnel when he was younger, before he had started acting. And I used to see him all the time, and he used to see me. We used to see each other a lot. Nothing ever came of that, but we used to see each other. We'd see each other very clearly when we saw each other. Oh man. So that was that.
Tracks.
Tracks. Oh, what's a good word for tracks? Soul. Tracks was predominantly Black and Latino. And the only other person that wasn't was the David DePino, who was the DJ. He was Italian. But, it was the extravaganzas. They hung out there. That was their little hangout. And all of the gay kids from the street, kind of like, I guess, the remnant, if the older crowd was there, was the remnant of Better Days and all of these people. And it was kids largely from the boroughs, from the hood, that were gay and needed a place to go. And they found this, and he had the right sound, and he was giving them what they wanted, and that was what it was. And it was another fun place to be. It always had a line to get in. It was always, it was good in that it was the one place where it was a mixed crowd in terms of gays and lesbians. Lesbians would go as well, and it was a mixed crowd that way. And it was mixed age-wise, and it was predominantly, like, I guess maybe there were one or two occasional straight people, but it was mostly all gay all the time, for the most part, with some exceptions of people that would come and hang out here and there. But it was predominantly all gay, and it was fun. It was a good party.
The Red Zone.
The Red Zone, I started going to the Red Zone at the tail end of their being open. Mixed bag. mixed, gay, and straight. I would say about 50-50. And they had the reason they called it red zone is because it was predominantly like red influences, and it kind of they tried to give it kind of a Moscow feeling ish. That was kind of the theme of the decor. So that's where the red zone came in. And it was I guess if I were going to say a word to describe it, it would be all inclusive. Yeah, we all partied there together, and everybody was comfortable with each other. And the straight kids did their thing, we did our thing, and everybody minded their business, had a good time, and went home.
The shelter.
Oh, the shelter was the closest thing musically that I got to the experience with the Paradise Garage musically. When Timmy, now you went to Shelter, so you know what I'm talking about. When Timmy played, there was nobody else. When he played, to really play the way he can play, I remember one night at so I guess my word for the Shelter would be phenomenal. Phenomenal. Because people, I guess because of the history and everything that people had missed, not having that quality of sound and all of that, and impact. At the end of the night, there were people that were standing like they had just been at a religious revival, and they saw Jesus at that booth because he played people into a frenzy. And that's what that became my next home. After, if I would say all of the home bases that I had, where it was basically like once the weekend came, I was there and you weren't getting me to go anywhere else because that's where I was going, period, was Gallery, then Paradise Garage, and then Shelter was my next home-based club that I went to Shelters in all of its locations. And they moved around. They actually had Shelter at the Underground for a little while. I went to that too. I went everywhere. If I knew Shelter was around, I was there. So I was definitely home base in Shelter.
Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of for people to better understand nightlife and night culture?
A lot of people that knew New York for the longest time in the club scene are saying the New York nightlife scene is dead at this point. And I would say it's not dead. It's going through an incubation period. That's what I feel, is that, it's kind of like the moth in the cocoon that's getting ready to become a butterfly again, once it finds its wings. Brooklyn, the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn has become the new go-to place for the Manhattan just became too costly to have it be effective. So a lot of stuff has left other than the showier kind of Studio 54 wannabe type places that predominantly cater to people with money and white folks. That's still in Manhattan. Bottle service and all that stuff ain't none of us interested in. It's pretty much still in some parts of Manhattan, and that still attracts that crowd. But the real party people, the real get down, I might kick my shoes off. I may not be able to find my bag or anything else by the time this is over with, people. They all are hitting Brooklyn. And Brooklyn has become the real deeper party scene up until this point. And they're still doing things to try to keep that alive in spite of COVID, because COVID, of course, this, the social scene is dead. So people are trying to actually pay for things by doing live broadcasts and doing things like that you pay for to listen to and that sort of thing. And people, support that as they will. And hopefully it'll survive this period. But that's where I would say we're at musically at this point. There's a lot of great music out there. And you're getting more and more DJs that are being a little bit more exploratory, getting away from formula, um, and starting to just see what else is out there, what I can do, what will people dance to, what will people accept musically, and testing the waters and paying attention to the dance floor to see are people dancing, are they walking away, are they going to get a drink and waiting for you to do something else. Those are your indicators of what's happening with your dancing. 718 sessions is a very popular party, and I have to explain to people why it's popular, because it has less to do with Danny Krivit and his DJing than Danny Krivit believes. It has more to do with the fact that he still keeps old prices for the first, I think, 100 people to get there, which is it's a very smart system. He has a very smart system, and it's why his parties are always crowded. Because for the first 100 people, you get in for free, and they count you as you go in. So it causes you to create a line to get in. And I think you have to be in. It's either the first 100 people, or sometimes they do it where you have to be there before 5 o'clock or before 6 o'clock or whatever it is. And so that starts that line. So that way, by the time the people who pay come, they see a crowd already there. They see a crowd enthusiastic about the party. They see them dancing. And they're like, oh, this is a happening party. So they don't mind paying. They buy their drinks. It's a happening party. So that brings the crowd that pays. He usually has two DJs playing in two different areas. It's him playing largely classics, which for me gets old, because been there, done that. I'm done. Love everybody that was a part of that scene, but I'm ready to move on. I've been there. Not only that, but again, what we were talking about earlier is that I heard it played at its best, and you playing it how you play it, and that's fine if that's what you want to hear. You want to be nostalgic, but I came to dance, and I want to hear music of this era, preferably. If you throw in a tune or two that I can remember, that's fine. Or the way I've enjoyed his parties best is I'll go and I'll listen to the other DJ, and he'll give me like some modern stuff, and I'll dance to that DJ. And then at the end of the night, I'll come in and he's doing classics, and I'll take the classics in at that point because I got my fix on in the other room. It's like, okay, I'll hear a few oldies but goodies. I'll get my reminiscence on, and it's just before closing, and then I'll go home and I'm good. So that's been how that party works. And also, his crowd. He has a very warm, happy, welcoming crowd, and I just love the people that go there. So it's really a social scene with some good music and good vibes, and it ends up being a good party that way. But it's not because Danny Krivit is turning anybody out on them turntables, and that's what I think that he's not really wholeheartedly aware of. And and I know a lot of people from that state. I know a lot of people at the door and all of that, going to the clubs as long as I have. I know a lot of these people. And I have to control my tongue sometimes because I love Danny as a person, but as a DJ, I feel like he's been doing it a long time. Just because you've been doing something a long time doesn't mean that makes you great. Just means that you know what you've been doing for a long time. And he's been doing that. He's been doing it a long time. And that's okay. I let him do what he does. I'm not going to mess with him because he's fixed in that. And for a lot of the young kids, it's new to them. So it brings old stuff into a whole new psyche. And that's good for the young people. So I leave it alone. I'm not going to pick at it. I'm not going to pick the scab on that one. We're going to let it heal. And let it be what it is. But that's really how that party works. But it is a good party because of that. Good vibes, great place to get out on a Sunday. It's early. It's usually in the afternoon. It's like post-tea dance hours, like usually around 4 or 5. It's usually over with by 12 on a Sunday. That means that you can go home and get a fairly decent night's sleep and still work the next day. So especially if you come early, you leave at 11 o'clock just before they close, you're good. You can go and get enough rest that you're okay to go start your week. So all of those things are the perfect storm that keeps him going. But I think Danny thinks that the crowd is there for Danny. And it's happened a few times where it's like either you're not paying attention or you just don't want to believe anything other because it just suits your ego to believe what you choose to believe. But there's been a number of times where the other DJ stops and the party starts to thin out or he'll have a great DJ. When he used to have the split level where he had the upstairs party and downstairs party, a lot of his crowd would run downstairs and get the real party on. And then at the end of the night, the party would come upstairs and finish out with Danny. Because Danny plays sometimes music that even when it was out, it wasn't happening. It's like we didn't listen to that shit when it was first out. Why are you playing it now 10, 20 years after the fact? That was the B-side of that record back then. And he does that quite a bit. And he bounces around a lot. He bounces around musically. It's almost like he's a jukebox, where it just plays random music, where it's like, okay, what made you feel like this song needed to follow what you just played at all? What happened? And then he had what I call his moments of lucidity, where all of a sudden he'll get in a groove and he'll actually start to play well, and you're dancing and you start to look up like, who the hell is playing? And it's like, oh shit, that's Danny. And you're like, oh, okay. All right, well, he's gonna hold it together. You're like praying, like, hold it together. At least give us a half an hour. You good? Hold it, and then he'll mess up and they'll be like, all right, he's back. It's like, all right, the party's over. He's back. He done woke up. So that's been my experience with Danny. But as a person, he's a lovely human being. He's a really sweet guy. And so I let Danny be Danny, do what Danny's got to do. But if I could give Danny some advice, it would be like, take some real DJ classes. I know you've been doing this a long time, but you could really benefit from learning a few things about paying attention to your audience and letting them tell you how you're hitting them. Because he'll be up there like going through this whole thing and be in a groove by himself. Everybody's walking off the dance floor. He's in this groove, and it's like, look at your dance floor. What are you doing? Look, you're not playing for yourself. You're playing for an audience. But that's just me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was a fantastic interview. Thank you for keeping it real. All right. Thank you so much. You have a great day.
You're welcome. Do the same. Be well.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.